Well, I wanted to tell a joke to open this morning, but I told it to my wife, and she ex-nayed it. So I'm going to read a story instead. By the way, my name is Nick. I'm one of the pastors here. And this is an inspiring story that I came across this week. It says this: I was driving home from a meeting this evening about 5 o'clock. I was stuck in traffic on Colorado Boulevard, and my car started to choke, sputter, and eventually died. I barely managed to coast into the gas station, glad only that I was not blocking traffic and would have a somewhat warm spot to wait for a tow truck. My car wouldn't even turn over. But before I could make the call, I saw a woman walking out of the Quick Mart, and it looked like she slipped on some ice and fell into the gas pump. So I got out to see if she was okay, and when I got there, I saw a young woman with dark circles in her eyes and overwhelmed with tears. She dropped something as I helped her up, and as I picked it up and gave it to her, realizing it was just a nickel. And at that moment, everything came into focus for me. The crying woman, the ancient Suburban crammed full of stuff with 3 kids and 1 in a car seat, and the gas pump that said $4.95. I asked her if she was okay and if she needed help, and she just kept saying, "I don't want my kids to see me crying." So we stood on the other side of the pump, and I asked her what was going on. She said that she was driving to California and that things were very hard for her. So I asked her, "Were you praying?" And it made her back away from me a little bit, but I assured her I was not a crazy person and just said, "He heard you and he sent me." So I took out my card, put money in her gas tank, walked to McDonald's, grabbed a couple bags of food, some gift certificates for later, and a nice big coffee. And she gave the food to the kids in the car. They devoured it like wolves. And we stood and talked a little, eating some fries by the gas pump, waiting for the gas tank to fill. She told me where she was from and her name, and that her boyfriend had left 2 months ago, and she'd not been able to make ends meet. She knew that she wouldn't have enough money to pay next month's rent, and finally, in desperation, called her parents, with whom she hadn't spoken to in over 5 years. They lived in California and said that she could come live with them until she could get on her feet. So she packed everything up. She told the kids they were going to go to California for Christmas, but didn't tell them they were going to live there. I gave her my gloves and a little hug, and I said a quick prayer with her for safety on the road. And as I was walking back to my car, she said, "So, are you like an angel or something?" And crying, I just said, "This time of year, angels are really, really busy. So sometimes God uses regular people." And of course, when I got back to my car, it started up right away. I got home, no problem. And I planned to take it to get a checkup tomorrow, but suspect that the mechanic will say that there's nothing wrong with it. As I came across this story, I just thought, in the culmination of the weeks that we've been through, working through practices to become more like Jesus, this to me is a modern day parable of what it looks like to actually live unhurried, to live in such a way with the pace of life that things begin to come into focus, like it did for the person telling this story. That it was in that moment they realized there's something more to what's truly happening right here. My car didn't just break down for the sake of breaking down, but that there's something more in this moment that God wants to do. I love that it came into focus for this person. And secondly, the whole statement of angels are really busy and God uses regular people sometimes. I want to be present enough, in a rhythm enough in the pace of life to be able to be used by God in the moment. And that's really what we've been working through over the past several weeks. We started this series recognizing the reality of our culture that is so fast-paced, such a hurried lifestyle of consumption, that it literally does consume our time, it consumes our energy, our focus, our resources, our attention, and distracts us from the things in this life that really matter. We are in such a hurry that we miss the things that are truly important. And when we're hurried, when we're busy, when we're cluttered, when we're distracted, we are rarely able to look beyond our own noses to see other people, let alone truly look inward to see, how am I? God regularly wants us to have a check-in and a check-up on how am I doing. And when we're so rushed, we're in such a hurry, it's hard to even get to that place where we can find time to truly diagnose what's going on the inside. I said this the first week, that hurry isn't just a sign of a disordered schedule, it's a sign of a disordered heart. And I don't know about you, but I want my heart to be aligned and in tune with the things of God and what He wants to do in me and through my life. And so many of us, unfortunately, it's our busyness, it's our lack of margin, that we're running on fumes. We're anxious, we're depressed, we're worried. And honestly, we're in a place that Jesus describes as weary. That we've grown weary in the midst of hurry and busyness. And my hope is that over the past few weeks, you've been able to really take a step back and diagnose and discern when you're hurried, when you're not hurried, and be able to assess, when I am living unhurried, I have a sense of peace and a sense of freedom and a sense of true life. And when I am hurried, the worst part of me comes out. I don't know about you, but that's really the place that I'm finding myself. When I'm unhurried, and life feels full of freedom. But when I'm in a hurry, the worst part of me is the thing that rises to the surface. So I want us just to look back through what these practices really are, as we are working our way through and culminating all of the content today. But my hope is that it's not just something that we go to church for 5 weeks in a row and hear some stuff and then we just move on and go back to normal life. We go back to the way that the culture is, the way that the world operates, but that we can actually truly begin to live counterculture and apply some of these things to our life. We started with this, a keystone verse in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Jesus says this, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." He said, "Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you." That we can look at the way Jesus lived through the biography of his life and the Gospels and through the teachings of the apostles to the churches and all throughout the New Testament. We can look at the way that Jesus lived his life and the things that he told his followers to do to fashion our life and to create healthy rhythms in the way that he lived so that we can step into the life that he called us to live. He said, "Let me teach you because I am humble and gentle at heart." Man, when I think about Jesus, I love to see him in this light, that he is humbly coming to me, gently wooing my heart, teaching me, longing for me to see him as he truly is, not to see him as a God in the sky or somebody that's mad and pointing a finger and picking out all the things that I'm doing wrong, but instead drawing me in with his kindness and grace and saying, if you come to me, you won't have to hurry and worry and live anxious, but you will actually be able to find rest for your soul. He says, "For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden that I give you is light." He wants us to live connected to him, abiding with him, and the things that he causes us to do and shows us to do, and the rhythm of life that he wants us to step into is supposed to be easy and light. But when we're out full steam ahead, hurrying, busy, consumed, it's really hard to step and live in that place. But if we look at the life of Jesus, and we as his disciples, or a better word is actually apprentices of Jesus' way, and we apply these things that he exemplified, that's when the easy yoke truly is experienced. So as we look back through, over the past 4 weeks, we've been through silence and solitude. Silence and solitude. We looked at Mark chapter 1. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Luke chapter 5, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. In our fast-paced, noisy culture, silence and solitude are so, listen, they are so essential to the health of our spirituality, of our connection to Father God. They are one of the pinnacle things that we need to do as often as possible so that we can connect with our Creator and know why we exist here in the earth. Jesus modeled this rhythm of withdrawing to quiet places to be alone with God. And for us, this whole practice simply creates space for us to listen to God's voice, to reflect on our life, and to recalibrate our priorities. I don't know about you, but I need this not just once a day, but multiple times a day. To recalibrate, to reorient my heart to the things of God, because last I checked, I'm a human being and I fall short a lot. But I need to constantly come back to the ways of Jesus. This silence and solitude isn't just silencing the external voices, your phone, your favorite show on TV, or the conversations that you have from day to day. It is silencing those, but it's also calming the internal dialogue. It's calming the internal chatter, the anxieties, and allows us to focus our thoughts on God for that moment. And here's the fruit when we practice silence and solitude. Number one, we just have an increased awareness of God's presence. If you spend time with God, you're able to actually see what He's doing in the midst of any situation. It's almost like a lens into something that you normally wouldn't see. But if you step into this place where you're connecting with God and then you navigate throughout your day, He begins to show up in more places and in more times and in more moments, and you're able to recognize it because you've spent time with the same God who's doing all of those things. But if we're distracted and we don't carve in that margin, we will miss what God has to say and what He's doing in that moment. So it's awareness of His presence, it's inner peace, it's clarity in decision making, and it's a freedom. Listen, it's a freedom from hurry and anxiety and the need for constant productivity. When you create that margin and spend time with God, when I don't do this, I'll go out throughout my day worried about what might come my way. But when I've spent time with God and put my trust in Him, it seems as though even if those things do come my way, there's a sense of peace and a sense of freedom and a sense of I don't actually have to work in this moment, but that God is with me taking care of it. And I don't know about you, but I have a problem with productivity. I feel like I have to be doing something in order to see value in my own identity. But that's not actually the reality. And the way that we overcome that type of thinking, and honestly that type of living, is through the practice of Sabbath. So a couple weeks ago, Mark talked about Sabbath, and he dove into this verse in Genesis chapter 2. He said, by the seventh day, God had finished the work that He had been doing. So on the seventh day, He rested from all His work. I just have to pause and say this. If the God of the universe, the creator of everything that we can see and everything that we cannot see, if He took a break, if He rested from work, friend, you can rest from work. Listen, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but you're not that important. It can wait. This idea that God Himself rested, and if God rested and created a rhythm of rest, then we ought to, as His creation, we ought to rest. says, then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. See, observing the Sabbath pushes back and resists against a culture of busyness, consumerism, and productivity. And our culture honestly glorifies these things. Get more, do more, work harder, be busy, hustle. But the Sabbath keeps us grounded in the rhythm that God designed for human beings, to work and to rest. And honestly, to actually work from a place of rest. See, Sabbath isn't something that we work so that, finally I'm so exhausted, then I can rest. Actually, we rest and then we work from that rest. So we rest in this place of trusting God with whatever we have to do. We're taking a break from it, so that when we work into that week, we're working and living from a place of rest, from a place of inner peace. The Sabbath declares our value is not tied to what we produce, but it's tied to who we are in Jesus. And the Sabbath helps us to reorient to that place and that truth. It's not a rigid set of rules, but a gift from God. And I really quickly want to just work through the 4 aspects of Sabbath just to remind us. Number 1 is just to simply stop. To stop working. To take a day and don't do work. For many of us, we're like, I don't know who could do that. But you can do it. I follow some life coaches and different things like that. And one of the guys I follow, I came across recently, I'd heard it before, but just inspired me again. He said, you will have time for what you make time for, no excuses. You will have time for what you make time for, no excuses. We all have time for a Sabbath if we make time for it. But we have to prepare to make that work. So we stop, we cease from work. Number 2, we rest. And by resting simply is engaging with activities that bring us life. Do things that fill your soul, fill your mind, fill your life with joy. The third is to delight, to enjoy God's creation, to go for a walk, to sit outside, go to a park, just get yourself in a place where you're in adoration of God. And the 4th thing is just to worship God through prayer and through reading His Word and through communion with one another. Just to live in this place of worshiping God. And finally, last week we talked about this reality that in our culture of consumerism and materialism, the idea that the lie that we've believed is that the more you have, the happier you'll be. But statistically, and many of us have experienced this, that the more that we have, actually, the more anxious we are. The more that we have, the more that we feel like we have to work to continue to attain what we've consumed already, drives us for more and more and more. But that Jesus offers a better way called living simply, living with simplicity and contentment. And this practice of simplicity actually offers us freedom, that living with less creates space for more of the things that truly matter. When we live with less in our schedule, we have more time for the things that matter. When we live with less stuff in our minds, less clutter in our homes, it creates more space for the things that truly matter, and we can define the important things, and it helps us to differentiate between what we want and what we need. And we talked about this idea of living with just enough. Living with just enough. True contentment comes from living within limits, trusting God to provide, and aligning ourselves with the teachings of Jesus on wealth, generosity, and eternal treasures instead of earthly treasures. We looked at a couple scriptures, Luke chapter 12. Jesus says, watch out Be on guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Life isn't about all that we have. It's about so much more. And Paul, to the church in Philippi, wrote this: I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. He went on to say that I can do all things through God who gives me the strength to do it. That I've realized what it means to be content is to depend on God's strength for me and believing that He will meet my needs. And it's really these three practices, and the one that we're going to discover today that kind of culminates everything that Jesus asks us to live. And there's many, many more spiritual practices, but these are the basic ones that will help us fashion our life and create a rhythm to life that helps us to live and walk and be like Jesus. And the fourth one is just simply slowing. Just simply slowing. And I'm a little convicted up here, honestly, because I feel like I'm breezing through this sermon. But this idea of simply slowing down, not just our minds or our hearts or our souls, but actually slowing down the way in which we go about life. For most people, slowing down does not come naturally. It's actually an ancient concept, but needs to be addressed more in the modern day, just because of how fast-paced our life really is. It wasn't talked about. Slowing down wasn't talked about back in Jesus' day. In fact, all the way up until about a century and a half ago, you didn't have to be told to slow the way that you live. Don't be hurried. And the reason is because to get anywhere, you had to walk there. You had to use fire to cook every meal. If you wanted to have a conversation with somebody, you'd have to go to them face to face. Now we have microwaves, cars, text messages, and FaceTime, right? And we can do all of those things at once. We can drive down the road FaceTiming somebody. Our car's connected to Starlink. So this idea of slowing really, it didn't need to be taught up until recently. Because the fastest anybody ever went until about a century and a half ago, before there were cars and trains and planes and everything else, the fastest anybody ever went was like 30 miles an hour on a horse. I mean, think about it. You were rowing a boat or riding a horse, and that's about as fast as you could go. But now we have everything at our fingertips. Everything literally is the speed of light, a click of a button. We can have anything we want in a moment's notice, and it drives us to be in a hurry. But to live the way that Jesus lived, we've got to learn to slow down. When you read in through the Gospels, you learn very quickly that Jesus lived a slowed down, an unhurried, an easily interrupted life. You read through the scriptures, and he's taking a long time to go from one village to another. They traveled by foot. He would even send the disciples into town and post up against a well and have a conversation with a stranger who never thought anybody would talk to her, especially a man like Jesus. Jesus, in fact, when he heard of one of his closest friends was dying, stayed where he was for 2 days before he even made his way towards him. Like, Jesus purposefully lived slowly. And if we're going to be like Jesus and do what Jesus did, we have to be people that live an unhurried, slowed down life. Dwight D. Eisenhower said this: what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. How many of you got a text message yesterday about something that could wait till tomorrow? But all of a sudden, ding, or an email, or whatever it might be, And now you're having conversations in your head about, oh, I need to address this person. I need to talk to that and make sure that so-and-so gets this invoice and da-da-da-da-da. And you're already living in Monday, Saturday afternoon. And it's not important, but it feels urgent. Sometimes the most important things are not urgent, but they're found in the moment. When you're present, when you're available. Jesus was aware, he was present, he was available in the moment. He lived purposefully slow. And this practice of slowing, honestly, could be one of the hardest things that we try to do as a people. John Ortberg, an author who is quoted quite a bit by John Mark Comer, the author of Ruthless, Elimination of Hurry, defines the practice of slowing as this: cultivating patience by deliberately choosing to place ourselves in positions where we simply have to wait. Doesn't that sound fun? Purposefully putting yourself in a place where you are forcing yourself to wait. Why would anyone do that? Here's why. I've got the answer for you. The reason is, if you put yourself in a place where you are forcing yourself to wait, to be patient, to be present in the moment, then when you are actually forced via a circumstance or someone else's decision, or even God waiting himself, causing you to wait, then when you're in the midst of that, you've already learned on your own how to be patient, how to endure the waiting. But if we don't actually force ourselves into a place of patience, into a place of learning how to be in the wait, then when we're forced to by someone else or something else, we are unable to actually have a peace and a calm in our spirit. And instead we get an anxiety, we get anxious, we get worried, we get concerned, and we try to go about controlling the situation on our own. So this idea of slowing is actually putting ourselves in positions that cause us to learn and to practice patience. When you slow down your body, you can slow down your mind, you can slow down your heart, you can slow down your soul. And that's the scary part, is our souls are so wrapped up and anxious and wired to keep going. But when we are able to slow down and rest and experience a sense of peace, even if it doesn't feel like it on the external, we can understand and feel it on the internal. That's where we truly understand this easy yoke, this light burden that Jesus wants for you and me. And when we do this, we learn to inhabit the moment fully, and we can be present to God, to others, and to ourselves. And really, isn't that what life is about? To be present to God, to be present to others, and to be present to ourselves. Man, there have been times, even recently, where I'm sitting having a conversation, or I'm driving down the road, and I've tried to get out of my head and into my body, and I've realized that I'm tense. My shoulders are, and for no reason. And I just tell myself, like, just relax, take a deep breath. I'm like, wow, that feels really good. I want to live from that place. I want to be aware of my body and either if I'm tense or if I'm relaxed, if I'm hurried or if I'm slow, and be able to lean into that. James chapter 5 says this: be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and the spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. I said this last service. I had my patience tested earlier this week, and it came back negative. The reason patience is so difficult to develop is because it takes too long, right? It's like learning to be patient and to stand firm, and ultimately to recognize the things that matter most, that one day we will all individually stand before the Lord, that we will give an account for our life. And I want for all of us to be able to stand firm and to say, I fashioned my life after you. I examined the scriptures. I learned from you. You taught me how to be yoked with you. And I implemented the rhythms and the practices that you exemplified in the scriptures. I got away and connected with you. I learned to take a break. I learned to simplify my life, and I learned to live slow and unhurried and be present to the moment. James is saying, learn to live in the waiting and stand firm and keep focus on what truly matters. I don't know about you, but that's what I want my life, to live for what truly matters. I've heard if you want to learn patience, take up the game of golf. Any golfers in the house? No one. Awesome. I'll explain it for you. The game of golf, actually conceptually to understand, is pretty easy. You just, ball from here to here, get it in the hole, and that's the goal, right? So it's easy to understand. And as you start learning the game of golf, people are telling you, don't swing like that, swing like this, do that, don't do this. But over time, you have to take what you've learned in your brain and let it sink down into your body and create muscle memory as you swing. Okay, I know that when I swing at this speed, it's going to go that far. Or when I don't get my hands through, or when I'm doing this, or my foot. So you learn, you guys get it? You learn from your brain down into your body to create muscle memory so that when you step up, you don't even think about it, you just hit the shot. Living for Jesus is the same way. It's not just learning about what Jesus says or how he lived, but it's letting it sink from your mind. It's not just knowledge, down into your heart and infused through your body so that you have muscle memory. This is how the rhythm of life should be. This is how I ought to live. These are the practices in which Jesus lives and calls me to live. And then I experience the ashrei, the good life. I get to taste and see that the Lord is good. Our apprenticeship to Jesus is a whole body endeavor. It's not just our minds, it's not just our heart, it's not just our spirit or our soul, but it's our whole being. And in Romans, Paul encourages the Roman church in chapter 12. He says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, realizing his grace and mercy over your life, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Our bodies have been designed by the Creator himself to offer them back to him in a sign of worship. It's not just our minds, it's not just our prayers, it's not just our words, but it's everything in our being to worship him, to be laid at his feet, to be offered up to him. And honestly, it concerns me, the speed in which we live in this culture, because I'm not worried, but I am concerned that if we continue to go at the pace of life, just like everyone else is living, that we will miss the moments that God has for us. If we continue to live hurried and busy and worried and concerned and consuming, just like the culture, then we won't actually experience the call of God upon our life. We will breeze right past it. But Jesus has such an amazing calling on each and every one of his kids, each and every one sitting in this room, young, old, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what season of life you're in. You have incredible worth, incredible value. That Jesus sees you and he desires not only to know you and for you to know him, but for him to use your life for the reason that you were created and placed on this planet for. And if we continue to live at a hurried pace, we will miss it, friends. I have to believe that in this season, that Jesus is calling this church to throttle down the speed in which we live. My father-in-law has a boat, and we go out in the summers, and it's an incredible feeling when you're just cruising, skipping right across the water, and then you throttle back. All of a sudden, the boat just sits back into the water, and you just start to float along with the waves and the wake that you created. And I just believe that, almost prophetically, that God is saying, if you dial back, if you throttle back the speed in which you're living and begin to step into this slow living, this unhurried life, that the momentum that God is carrying you through will ripple out wakes into your family and into your friends' life and into your community that will leave a legacy for his kingdom. So let me just give you some really, really practical ways to slow down, and then I want to end with a Bible story, and we will head out. And I'm talking, these are really practical. 5 ways to slow. Get in the long line at the store. Scan, longest, as many carts. After church today, go to Winco or Costco, pick the longest line with the people that have the most stuff and get behind them. And don't pull out your phone. Just be. Maybe have a conversation with somebody. Maybe pray. But endure the wait and learn to stand firm and to be patient and to be content. The second thing, get in the slow lane when you're driving. If you pull up to a stoplight or you're a little ways off and the light turns yellow and there's 2 cars on this side and 4 on this side, switch to this lane. Some of you guys are squirming. It's like, who does that? Force yourself to slow so that when life forces you to slow down, you can endure the wait. Go on a date and leave your phone at home. Go to the coffee shop, leave your phone in the car. Be present to the cup of coffee. Aware of the baristas and conversations that are being had. Pray. Walk slowly. In this season, man, people are going to be running. I just picture Black Friday, the doors open, 50 people get trampled because of, everybody wants that one item. Walk slow. Park far out. Meander into the store. Drive the speed limit. If the light turns yellow, slow down. Don't speed up. Full stops. Go the speed limit. These are ways, very practical ways, to actually train ourselves to live a slow, unhurried life. And for some of us, it's going to be really, really uncomfortable. But I promise you, as you venture into this, you will begin to be freed up, to be interrupted, to be aware and present to the moment, to be available to God, to others, and to yourself. I end with this. As I'm describing some of these practical things, some of you could be saying, what a waste. What a waste of time. What a waste of focus. What a waste of energy. But there's a story in Mark chapter 14, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but it might be behind me, where Jesus is at a home, and this woman comes in with a very, very expensive bottle of perfume. And she spills the perfume all over Jesus' head. And the disciples in particular begin to rebuke her. They're dominating her. What a waste. You know how much money, that could have been a year's salary. You could have sold it and given it to the poor. And Jesus says something incredible. He responds and says, you're always going to have the poor among you. There will be time for that. But what she did was beautiful. She anointed me for my burial. And what could seem from the outsider's perspective is that she wasted something. In fact, many of the other scriptures that describe a similar story declare that this woman was actually a prostitute. And that this was her livelihood. This is how she made money, was this expensive perfume that would cover up where she had been and the things that she had been doing and attract others to do the same. This was her livelihood. This was everything that she had. And she wasted it on Jesus. And as I look at my own life and I look at the lives of Heights Church, I wonder what it would look like if, from outsiders' perspective, people would just say, man, they're just wasting their life on Jesus. But that we would live and offer ourselves as a living sacrifice to God, exemplifying the life of Jesus through the practices and the rhythms of life that He showed us how to live, that we would taste and see that the Lord is good and walk in His ways. Others might look at your life and say, man, she's just wasting their life on Jesus. But that Jesus would point to your life and say, what they're doing is so beautiful. And I love at the end of this, Jesus actually says, wherever the gospel is preached, this woman's story will be told. Wouldn't it be incredible if whenever your name was mentioned, that there would be a ripple effect, a legacy left for the kingdom of God because of your willingness to sacrifice it all, to lay everything down, to live unhurried, not the way that the culture lives, but to live counterculturally, to walk in the ways of Jesus and to apply the things that He showed us to our lives. Amen. I just believe that hangs in the balance, that we wouldn't leave from this place going right back into the hustle bustle of life, right back into the busyness of the holidays, right back into the this, that, and the other thing, but that we would create margin, that we would find silence and solitude, that we would Sabbath, that we would rest, that we would simplify our lives, and that we would live slow and unhurried and present to the moment the way that Jesus did. Let me pray for us. Jesus, we need You. In no way, shape, or form can we do this on our own. And I'm so grateful that You never asked us to. But that, Lord, You truly do desire for us to know You, to become like You, and to do the things that You did here on this earth. So my prayer, Lord, is that when we do get distracted, when we do get hurried, when we do get busy, Father, that You would help us recognize and reorient our heart, mind, and body to Your ways. Lord, I pray throughout this week and in life groups, God, that You would continue to speak to us, continue to help us establish these healthy rhythms of life so that we can step into life and life to the full, the life that You've called us to. In Jesus' powerful name, amen.